Hello, everyone. It's my great pleasure to present our work on computational modeling of shockwave and laser lithotripsy. I'm an associate professor at the Virginia Tech. This is joint work with John Doble and Pei Zhong at Duke University. Shockwave and laser lithotripsy are treatments of urinary stone disease. The idea of shockwave lithotripsy is to use a high energy acoustic waves focused at the stone to break the stone into small fragments. This is non-invasive, but suffers from relatively low success rate. Also, tissue injury is an important issue. Laser lithotripsy uses long pulsed laser to erode and break a kidney stone. It has higher success rate compared to shockwave lithotripsy. That's its own issues. For example, the need of a higher level of expertise, long operating room time, and also it is not recommended for treating big stones. Both treatments are widely used today, but as you can see, each of them has some issues, limitations. Now consider the improvement of lithotripters and maybe also the optimization of treatment parameters for individual patients. There is a challenge in that both shockwave and laser lithotripsy involves complex physics, and the success of treatment depends on many physical parameters. For example, stones differ in many ways. Some of these parameters can be measured, but they cannot be controlled. There are actually control parameters that can be changed or controlled, which are those related to the lithotripter or energy source. For example, the pulse energy, frequency, the spatial and temporal distribution of power. This means we can change these parameters for individual patients if we know the optimal values. The difficulty is that the impact or the effect of these parameters to the final treatment outcome is quite is complicated in terms of physics. The video here shows a laser lithotripsy experiment in a water tank. You can see, at least you can see in each pulse, there's cavitation that occurs at the tip of the fiber. This has multiple effects on the stone. At a high level, in laser lithotripsy, for example, the stone is subjected to a combination of thermal and mechanical loads and laser radiation. All of them can also contribute to stone damage and disintegration, but they can also be linked to side effects, for example, tissue injury. We have been working on the development of a physics-based computational model of laser and shockwave lithotripsy. This is a quick overview of the equations we solve. First, we solve the compressible Navier-Stokes equations for within regions occupied by fluid materials, including both liquids and also bubbles, and possibly also soft tissues. To close the Navier-Stokes equations, we need one equation of state for each material. To track the boundary of each material, we use a level set method, which means we introduce this new variable phi that gets advected by the fluid velocity field, and the sign of phi tells us whether a point is inside or outside of a material subdomain. We solve the laser radiation equation, which is a simplified form of the general radiative transfer equation, or RTE. To account for the effects of cavitation bubble dynamics, we need phase transition models, particularly a vaporization model. And finally, we need to solve solid mechanics equations, get the displacement, deformation, stress, damage, and fracture in the kidney stone. Now, if you look at these equations or these models, the solution for each one of them is not new. However, the solution of the combination of these equations as one system is relatively new and leads to computational challenges. One of them being the tracking of material interfaces that undergo large deformation and possibly also topological changes. Here we're referring to, for example, tracking the boundary of the surface of a bubble, the boundary of a stone that may have complex geometry and also may break into multiple parts. the boundary of laser fiber and the region that is exposed to laser. Some of our work has been focused on the development and use of some implicit interface tracking methods. For example, we use the embedded boundary method to track the boundary of a solid structure within a fixed background-free mesh. We use the level set method to track the interfaces between different fluid materials, such as the boundary of the surface of a bubble. And this is an example that shows the combined use of embedded boundary and level set methods. These are relatively recent or new numerical methods that get used in modeling of lithotripsy. Next, I will present a few case studies. This sound you hear comes from this lab experiment of Shockwave lithotripsy. These videos show our simulation results of pressure, stress, and the predicted dynamic fracture. You can see we can capture our simulations can capture the interaction of shock waves inside the stone, and also the correct location where fracture occurs as compared to the experimental observation. And now if you look at the right side of this slide, this is another validation study where in the experiment, we shifted the stone up and down. And by doing that, when we shift the stone, part of the stone gets moved outside of the focal zone of the shock wave. That means we get different fracture patterns. And on the right, you can see that the numerical simulations are able to capture the same fracture patterns. So the computational model is found to be able to capture the location and shape of the fracture observed in laboratory experiments. And then we moved on to explore the effect of shock wave profile to the damage and fracture in a model kidney stone. On the left, this is a plot pressure versus time of a shock wave of a pressure sensor placed within the focal zone. The red curve is our baseline shock wave. And you can see what we did is that we gradually changed the shape of the shock wave without changing the total pulse energy. So this goes, if you're going downward, this is A1 plus A5. And you can see the results suggest that indeed the wave profile or the shape of the shock wave has a significant impact on the resulting on the damage and the fracture inside the stone. Particularly, this is suggesting from A1 to A4, you see we have greater damage. This is indicating that a negative tensile phase, meaning negative pressure going downward, a negative pressure phase may facilitate stone fracture in shockwave lithotripsy. And the detailed numerical results, simulation results, allow us to explain this finding based on shockwave interactions. Next, a study on the effects of cavitation bubble dynamics. Cavitation occurs in both shockwave lithotripsy due to low pressure and also in laser lithotripsy due to local high temperature. The interesting thing is that cavitation and the resulting bubble dynamics has both positive and negative effects. For example, stone erosion, sometimes referred to as cavitation erosion, is a beneficial effect. Wave shielding, as you can see from both movies, this describes a negative effect where the bubble blocks the incoming shock wave, but blocks a stone from an incoming shock wave. Tissue injury is often linked to the expansion of a cavitation bubble. Moses effect is a beneficial effect in laser lithotripsy that describes the expansion of a bubble, of a cavitation bubble that constructs a gaseous channel that facilitates the delivery of laser energy on the surface of the stone. You see, these simulations allow us to explicitly see these effects, and also it makes it possible to quantify the effect of each of these. Next, this is a prediction of laser-induced cavitation in laser lithotripsy. On the left, you're looking at a laboratory experiment. This is using Holm-Yak laser, which is the most probably the most common type of laser used in laser lithotripsy. On the right, first to the upper half, this is showing a simulation that is set up in a similar way as compared to this experiment. You see, roughly speaking, we're able to capture the same bubble shape. And also we're able to visualize to resolve different physical fields, including laser radiance, pressure, temperature, and velocity fields. And then more recently, we moved on to investigating the effect of laser beam width. This is a comparison between broad laser beam and narrow beam. You can see the difference is quite obvious. When the laser beam gets narrower, we're seeing an elongated bubble. In particular, the result is showing that this may facilitate, really creates that Moses effect, creates a channel that facilitates the transfer of laser energy from the fiber tip to a target stone if there's a gap between the fiber and the surface of the stone. Finally, a quick summary. We are developing a multi-physics computational model. All the codes that we write our own codes. All the codes we write are open source. These are the two solvers that we wrote and we used to generate all the results that are presented in this presentation. It can be downloaded from internet. And then we presented a few case studies that indicate potential use of this type of models. Finally, this flowchart, I think, shows in our mind the general research strategy. We think that this type of computational model can be used at least in two ways. First, for hypothesis testing to answer many what-if questions. For example, what if the laser pulse, the shape of the profile of a laser pulse gets changed? And also it can be used to conduct automated parametric studies. Together with laboratory experiments, we think that this type of work can improve our understanding of mechanisms of stone fracture and tissue injury. And also it's going to allow us to efficiently explore the high dimensional parameter space. Now, after that, combining the new computational tool, improved understanding, improved knowledge, and data set, we hope that this approach can allow us to improve the design of lithotripters and also probably also help with the personalization of treatment strategies. This summarizes my talk. Thank you everyone for your attention.